Okay, the Plan Commission meeting for July 1st, 2021 is called to order. Will Commissioner Hand lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Gia, can you call the roll, please?
Member Zerbichon?
Here.
Member Foley? Member McGarry?
Here.
Member Stanley?
Here.
Member Verdon?
Here.
Member Hand?
Here.
Chairman Coulter?
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience this evening who wishes to speak in an item not listed on our agenda that's related to matters which
I'm sorry,
concern
there are
the Plan
minutes
Commission?
right before that. We need to approve the minutes.
Oh, okay. That was next on my list that I got from Gia.
Okay.
She gave me a
Oh,
script.
okay, never mind. Okay, thank you. It's okay.
Okay, so do you want to do the minutes first?
Either way.
Okay, well, I'll finish what we were working on then. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak tonight on a matter that's not on the agenda with the Plan Commission this evening? Okay, seeing as there are none, are there any material changes to the June 17th, 2021 minutes? Can I have a motion to approve the minutes for June 17th, 2021?
I move to approve the minutes from June 17th, 2021.
And a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion is made by Commissioner McGarry and seconded by Commissioner Zarepchan. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. We have one item on the agenda this evening, and that is our citizen planner training by the APA Illinois Chaddock Institute for Metropolitan Development. Our session leaders this evening are going to be Marty Scott and Andy Cross, and I'd like to thank the trustees that are here this evening to learn about what we do here at Plan Commission and your important role as trustees in our village. So thank you very much for being here. Okay. Whenever you're ready, guys.
Yeah, so I just wanted to briefly introduce Marty Scott is from Western Springs, Andy from Highland Park, so they kind of represent north and south suburban communities. So this session is sponsored by the APA Illinois chapter. So they go around different communities, and Marty is a returning speaker. He was here last year. Marty and I know probably going back to 2002 with APA, serving APA, so a long time, friendship with Marty. And of course, Andy I knew a little bit later on. So they're going to cover, starting with the tools, like our comprehensive plan, zoning code, how to use them in our reviews. They're going to kind of go quick overview of the annexation strategy, subdivision regulations, and other sections of the village code, and explain the roles and responsibilities of the Plan Commission, and briefly touch on other village committees, talk about meeting management, how to manage meetings, conduct hearings on the different zoning reviews, and talk about the Open Meetings Act and ethics. So there's a lot to cover, so please be patient. At the end, you can ask Q&A with them, anything related to Plan Commission approvals and the kind of reaching to the board, what happens. We had situations when the Plan Commission made a recommendation, the village board went in a different direction. What happens in those kind of situations? And so we can certainly ask, those kind of questions with that. Marty and Andy, welcome, and it's all yours.
All right, well, thanks so much. I'm Andy Cross. I think we'll stand up to the podium when we get started, but allow me just to do a quick introduction here. I work up in Highland Park. I've been up here for about 14 years, and before that I was a planner in the Twin Cities for about 5 years. So I have a lot of experience in suburban planning, and I'm active with the APA, and so doing sessions like this is a great opportunity to take our experience as professional planners and talk to citizen planners. And it really helps put city planning in perspective, because a lot of these terms, zoning, special use, permitted use, they get thrown about, but they can all get jumbled together. And so we really appreciate the opportunity to sit down here and sort of demystify a lot of that, and help you better understand your roles as citizen planners on the planning commission.
And I'm Marty Scott, as BJ said, I'm Director of Community Development in Western Springs. I've been there for about 15 years. Before that, I was with the Village of Winfield for a short time, and then kind of cut my teeth in the planning world, municipal world, in Mokina, just south of here. So I grew up in Tinley Park, so home in Glen is near and dear to my heart, because I kind of feel like I saw it grow up from like a rural community to semi-rural, which it still is, and it's beautiful driving in here. So to echo what Andy said, it really is fun to get out and to meet people from different communities, and to, as I'm sure Andy would agree, to thank you for what you do, because I would joke with my planning commission members, like, this is why you make the big bucks. But in truth, when I explain to elected people, I say that in the planning commission, the zoning board, economic development commissions, but especially planning commission and zoning board of appeals, it's really kind of where the nuts and bolts of things get worked out. And it can be tougher at times than being a trustee sometimes, because it's very personal. It might be the first time somebody's come out to Village Hall. They might come out with a chip on their shoulder, and you're sitting there as like their target if they're angry. Hopefully they're not always angry, but then they leave educated, at least they were heard. But it's a tough job, so we applaud you for that. And I'm always thanking our planning commission and volunteers profusely, because it's an awesome way to do your civic duty, well beyond something like jury duty, which we'll joke about. So I'm glad to be here, and I look forward to rolling through this with you.
Yeah, so why don't you get started on the first section, if you have them out there. And importantly, you all have printouts of the presentation with some notes in it. There are 77 slides in this presentation, and it's not our intent to touch on every part. So, I would keep going. Make a circle, make a note if there's something you want to come back to. After each chapter, we have a Q&A, so there's something we can come back to. But there's a lot of material to get through, and we want to keep things moving, and so we won't touch on everything. So if anything catches your eye, circle it.
Okay, so this is just, there's a little bit of history here, but when, I probably said this last time I was here, but Daniel Byrne's kind of like the Michael Jordan of city planning. He's the one we look to for inspiration, and this quote that's on there is something that's something planners live by. Really, inspirational. He was an amazing guy, really worth reading about. If you haven't read the book, well, what's the book? The book, Death of the White City, thank you. It fell out of my head as soon as I started to mention it. Really good book that's historical, and also got some drama in it. This very exciting looking woman, unfortunately, is very tired at the time this picture was taken. Jane Addams, very important in the areas of housing, and another person that's really interesting to read about, kind of set the stage for a lot of the housing trends you see in urban areas. Jane Jacobs, somebody obviously more urban oriented, but this book is one of the must reads for planners. Talks about her being an activist and her impact on not just New York, but other areas of housing. So city planning really, goes beyond, this is kind of the American version of it, but goes well beyond this, in other civilizations. But in Chicago, the World's Fair, the White City, which has impacts back to 1893, and you still see some of the remnants of that. There's the bones of the plan that came from that World's Fair are still there, with things like Grant Park, Millennium Park now, of course. Some of the museums, not many of them, but they're left over, and the Suburban Forest Preserve system actually was born from a part of that plan. So 1909 plan, 1916 plan that got more into zoning and separating uses, and then
Euclid is a community in Ohio that had even more of an impact on the kind of planning that a few of us planners here do regularly. That talks about separating uses, separating that residential use from an industrial use and buffering and so forth. So in a nutshell, that's some quick history of planning.
So let's get into some nuts and bolts, the tools of the trade. When we think about, let me make sure here. So policy planning. There are different levels when we think of city planning about, there are different levels of what they are. What are you planning? So this list right here kind of gives a good idea of some of the different types of plans that you'll run into. Every town has a comprehensive plan. It's intended to have a comprehensive plan. And that devolves into zoning, which we'll get into in a bit, and the zoning code, which I'm sure you guys have worked with quite a bit. And we'll get into some nitty-gritty of zoning code later in this presentation. So comprehensive plan is something you'll refer to more on a day-to-day. But as you look through this list and these other types of plans, they'll ring bells as different types of tools and toolkits that planners use and you'll run into or be exposed to in some measure in your time on the commission. The comprehensive plan itself is a broad-reaching, overarching document that encapsulates a community's goals. Where do they want to go? And it has separate chapters and breaks down sort of strategies long-term, whereas a code itself becomes more tactical and is more nimble and agile. And that's where you see that bottom bullet point there, zoning. And note that second bullet point. There is very real authority for what we do that devolves from the federal government to the state and from state to municipalities. So there is real authority here, and the comprehensive plan starts broad, and then through zoning, you get into more deep regulation. These are the typical topics in the comprehensive plan that I mentioned. It's meant to be overarching. It's meant to capture as much as you can. And one of its key goals is to establish a shared vision with everybody. And that way, the whole community can have a shared idea of where things are going. Agree with it or not, that's okay. Let's have that discussion. But a comprehensive plan is meant to capture everything and communicate a shared vision. So circle this slide and come back to it. This sort of summarizes the steps that go into creating a comprehensive plan. This isn't written by a planner in an office. It's meant to be an iterative document. It's meant to be a document created with public input and again, to create that shared vision. And then only down there at number 7 is it adoption of the plan. After is at number 6, the iterative process, selecting different options that we can go through. So number 7 there, adopting the plan, and then you can see as it goes on, actually executing it, because part of the plan is, sets time standards and, objectives to meet goals, strategies to meet objectives, little by little, an incremental movement to accomplish what a comprehensive plan lays out. And they're meant to be updated. This isn't a one and done. The city I work for in Highland Park, our master plan was originally done in 1976. And the idea, the rule of thumb, 20 years. Try to update these every 20 years, and we are endeavoring to do this. Public participation is huge in comprehensive planning. So you can see here just the ways planners try to do public participation. Technology's come a long way. We're able to do more, especially when it comes to visioning. You used to have old school architects kind of draft plans, but now we can do all that in Photoshop and Google Earth and SketchUp. Just these wonderful ways of doing massing studies. When we look at how intense do we want a residential area to be, we can map out 4 different density studies, and it really puts pictures in people's eyes. And again, working with the public there is key to do this. And the last item there is public hearings, and that's really where you'll have the rubber meet the road as things finally get reviewed and approved. So again, this just this slide is a reference to acknowledging who the comprehensive plan is for. It doesn't serve just a downtown. It serves the whole community. And a community isn't just single-family housing, it's multifamily housing, but that means townhomes for a certain population, but it also means apartments and studios and single one-bedroom apartments for a different demographic. And the comprehensive plan is meant to take all that in. Plan implementation. And that's what I got into about strategies for accomplishing objectives and objectives to satisfy goals. And plan implementation is much harder than it sounds. I can't tell you how many communities have comprehensive plans for, like a sustainability plan that will sit on a shelf because there isn't a firm plan on how to implement it. Ideas are great. Ideas are wonderful, but if you don't sit down, brass tacks, and say, well, how the bloody heck are we going to do it, it's not going to get implemented. So an implementation plan is an essential part of a comprehensive plan. So that was pretty broad, but let's keep going here. Regulating development. The first bullet point there. How do we have the authority to do that? If somebody wants to build a new, let's call it an inline shopping center with 5 tenant spaces, that's going to end up having a karate school and a bakery and, it's kind of a starter space for small businesses. How do we have the authority to say, yes, you can do it, but we need this many parking spaces from you? What gives us that authority? The general term is police power. It's not police sirens police, it's not law enforcement police, it's a broader term than that. And so communities have police power authorized, as I mentioned, from the state, and starting from the federal government, devolved to the state, and then devolved to communities. And so it does, so cities do have this authority, but it's incumbent on communities and planners, resident planners, to make that transparent, to make sure everybody can understand it. And so each community is different. Zoning codes are different to reflect the needs, the goals, and the plans for different communities. So let's talk about zoning itself. That's such a common term. Zoning regulates land use. What can you do on a property? And it regulates bulk. How much stuff can you build on a property? Write those 2 words down next to this slide. Bulk and land use. Those are the 2 key takeaways for what zoning accomplishes. It gets better and more comprehensive than that, but that's a great overarching thought for what zoning accomplishes. And so there's a graphic here. You can see that's a very typical bulk regulation graphic. It's where buildings can go. You guys have heard of setbacks, and it's what you can do on a property. Why can't your next door neighbor put up a 24-hour car wash on his inside his garage to make some extra money? Because it's not allowed by zoning. So one way to look at this is zoning keeps me from doing what I want, and it's a poor use of authority. The flip side of it is zoning keeps my neighbor from absolutely shafting me by doing terrible things on his property. That's the paradigm I encourage you to have about zoning. It's there to uphold property values, and the term we'll run across here is morals, ethics, and upholding and general welfare. That's the term that we'll see here later in this presentation. So that's what zoning is meant to accomplish. It's meant to be protective and not restrictive. So when we talk about zoning, it starts by the establishment of zoning districts, and different districts regulate the intensity of use, which is land use, and bulk, and how things are built. Your neighbor simply can't build a 5-story house next to you and block your sunlight. It's because of the zoning regulations there. So look at these different categories of zoning. And as it happens, this is a map of downtown Highland Park, our central business district. And so think about the zoning paradigm as a pyramid. And at the top of the pyramid is intense commercial activity. Right there are downtown, pedestrian-oriented shops downtown, parking garages. That's what happens. And then you get out to the periphery of the red, lower on the pyramid, and it's less intense. We get the more sprawling buildings, And you might have an auto repair shop in there. You don't want that in your downtown, but it's a commercial entity that belongs in a commercial area. So you get less intense as you go out. And then you start to get multifamily housing around, no longer commercial, but still intense, more intense than your neighborhoods, single-family neighborhoods. And then around the very outside, you get single-family housing, the least dense, or the least intense. And then you get bigger and bigger lots and further and less intensity as you go further out. So think about zoning from this pyramidal idea about really intense and down, 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 down. And again, different for different communities. But in Highland Park and sort of a downtown commercial core, that's a good way to think about it. So when we talk about zoning and items that come before you, you're not just approving a zoning application. There are specific types. So look at those in those first 4 bullet points. A permitted use in a single-family district, well, a single-family house is a permitted use. In a downtown zoning district, a restaurant is a permitted use. But let's talk about a special use, the 3rd bullet point there. Here's an interesting one. Veterinarian clinics. They mean different things to different people. A veterinarian clinic can have overnight boarding. They can have surgery. They can have medications, and we don't know this. And you know, are they going to have a 24-hour operation? So when you think about a veterinarian clinic, oh yeah, I get that. Actually, there are all kinds of different models out there, and do they need a certain amount of speed, especially overnight boarding and the noise nuisances? All these things need to be considered when somebody says they want to open up a veterinarian's clinic. And the special use process allows the Plan Commission to do that, to look at what I call negative externalities. What might be the ripple effects if this business goes in here? So it's not a permitted use. A veterinarian's clinic is a conditional use or a special use, interchangeable, because it allows the commission to put in very specific conditions. And that's a powerful tool. When you go out and mow your yard, nobody can tell you when you can or can't, other than, sure, basic noise nuisances, but nobody can tell you when you can or can't. But if there's a landscaping business that goes downtown or, you know, in a residential area, and it's a conditional use, you can say, we'll give you your special use permit, but you cannot mow after 5:30 p.m. or before 8 in the morning. You can't. And they have to follow that, or they could lose their special use permit and not be able to run their business. So it's a conditional use permit, a special use permit is very powerful because it's a real condition and a real restriction. Oh, look at that bottom bullet point. You can't put in bogus conditions. You know, everybody's got to wear no tank tops, guys. You can't do that. So there has to be what's called a rational nexus between the condition you put in and a public benefit. Mowing hours of operation is very common. Or in certain circumstances, number of seating. We just had a bar go in, a brewery, Ravinia Brewery, and they wanted to have bands, and it drove the neighbors crazy. It's right by a residential area. So a condition is you can have 3 music events per month. It's more than that, but as an example, only 3 per month. They have to end by 9:30, and none of the instruments can be amplified. Boom, that's it. And they're like, okay. But that's a condition they had to do. Marty, please.
I think those examples I've seen, I have an attorney that's very conservative and sometimes overly conservative, village attorney, and he'll put in things like restrictions on deliveries. And one time, it's funny, Andy mentioned the animal hospital veterinary clinic. He was talking about deliveries, and like, well, I don't know how much they give away deliveries, but we left it in there just to make sure because there was residential properties right nearby that they didn't have deliveries too often. We also had, from previous experience, you know, medical waste and moving things from the property, like making sure that was done properly. Some of it's kind of overkill and it's really subjective based on use, but it's the kind of thing that if you're in favor of something, you really think it's good for the community, but there's some objections from the public that come up, it can be a good way to kind of find a compromise and address the issue. So just think about how the business operates, and that's exactly what Andy was saying, whether it's noise or hours of operation, you can always look at what their operational characteristics are.
Yep.
So
Yeah, please, Vijay.
quickly, so while you're on the special use discussion, can you explain if massage therapy establishment should be like a special use, or could they be simply licensed by the village clerk upon checking the certification or licensing by the state? Do you see any reason that to be a special use? type application?
Yeah, massage therapy is a tough one, and they are heavily state regulated, and are regulated very heavily by the state of Illinois. So a good one approach, and the one that I might recommend, is having codes in place in the zoning code that require everybody's in there's licensed, by the state. If that's in your code, don't worry, they have to prove that to get their certificate of occupancy to open the business. That's easier than doing a case by case, because the use itself takes place indoors, has hours of operation, and so the potential for negative externalities there is perhaps less if it's heavily regulated within the code. So it can be a permitted use, but to dance the dance, you have to check all these boxes. Everybody has to be licensed, windows cannot be covered, this can all be in the code, as opposed to, okay, what did we want to remember for these? Okay, and then on a case by case having to remember all the conditions. So that's another thought. It's gone. Okay, so let's look at, so that's what I wanted to tell you to do. So in the lines by this slide for special use, write case by case and specific conditions, because they are very case by case, and that's their intent. And as you look through your zoning code, and we'll talk about that in a while, you can look at all the land uses that are conditional, and you'll be surprised. Okay, and so I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole. Look at the fourth bullet point there on the top, a planned development, or PUD. That's something we're going to talk about because it is a wonderful planning tool. So we'll get there in a second. So we keep talking about zoning code and the language in it. It's a living, breathing document. You don't adopt a zoning code in 1982 and just coast. Just the opposite. The zoning code is the document that needs to be updated to address ever-changing technology, changing communication styles, and changing economic conditions. When retail was booming in 04, 05, Highland Park's downtown had some really restrictive zoning regulations. Retail only on the bottom floor. We don't want banks and realtors coming in here in our downtown and then closing the doors and locking up at 5 p.m. We want a vibrant downtown, retail only. Retail's dead. So, retail it's not dead, but it's not what it used to be. Brick and mortar retail just isn't what it used to be. So we were struggling with vacant storefronts because these landowners were saying, we can't get a retail operator in here. So we've had to change that and evolve. So keeping zoning current is essential. This can be done by changing the text, saying not retail only, or by rezoning. A property that we originally intended for commercial just cannot build there. Let's consider a rezoning to a multifamily residential zoning district, changing the zoning. So the planned development. This is a powerful tool. So on your lines there, how about write PUD equals PD? They're the same thing. You're going to hear these interchanged throughout your time on the commission. Planned unit development or planned development, same thing. And we'll think about it as, mini zoning code for a development. That's what it is. And it's a very powerful tool that's been around since the 50s, and it's evolved over time and become more dynamic. But what it essentially sets up as an agreement between a developer and the city. And the developer can say, I can't meet these landscaping requirements. I can't provide 45 parking spaces. I'd like a variation to this. I'd like my building to be 5 feet taller so that, so that I can have this architectural feature or the construction type I would like to use. You can ask for a series of modifications to zoning requirements within a planned development. That's why, and they all get accepted all at once or reviewed and approved all at once as a package deal, a PUD. But in return, here's the powerful thing. Look under the green heading. There are benefits to a municipality for considering a PUD. Chiefly, you can ask for a public benefit. Legally, you can ask for a public benefit if there are zoning modifications being requested. Now, you can't ask for a new ambulance. You can't ask for a new roof on City Hall. It needs, again, to have some sort of nexus with the development and its impact on the community. So we had a developer ask for another story. He set it way back from the street, so you could barely see it. He did all these things that made it really impressive. But he asked for 14 feet of height relief. That's a lot of zoning relief. So we said, how would you, let's talk about public benefits. We've created a list so that developers aren't just grabbing in the dark. Green technology is a great public benefit. Please put in permeable pavers, bird-friendly glass, a roof garden, something that will benefit the community environmentally. And in this case, there was a bike path in fairly close proximity to this project that was crumbling. I mean, just And so he said, I'll rebuild that. As part of this project, I'll pay for the rebuilding of that. We put wayfinding signs around our downtown to help, to help economic development. They're expensive. And so for a project downtown, he said, I will give the city the sum of $5,000 towards the wayfinding sign plan. That's a direct impact for his project downtown. He's impacting the downtown, and the city's getting something back from it. So, and that's all agreed upon beforehand, and it's entirely legal because, again, we didn't ask for a new fire truck, or anything obtuse. Marty.
I was going to give another example that might be a little more appropriate here. That's a great example of suburban downtown. But in my community, we had an old golf course that was being sold, which happens from time to time. We may have experienced that here, but they had beautiful old trees through the parkway, the place where I play from, because I'm a terrible golfer. But it has old trees, and so what they did was design around those and preserve those, and then add in some elements like Andy was saying that are for the public, like bike trails that could run through the development, and put in landscape buffers because it's near 294 tollway, which they should have done anyway, but they went beyond that. They also did some other improvements in the community. In that case, it was an annexation, so we were able to get not the ambulance, but to get extra property from them to be able to flip to someone else and sell it, and then get the impact fees that would come with it. But the main thing in that green column that's there is getting that benefit of those trees being preserved and thousands of more trees planted afterwards, because obviously they don't last forever. So it's a negotiation. It's really subjective. It's not like there's a formula.
Right.
That you add up and say, okay, yes, we've gotten the most out of the development because it's really subjective, and obviously that ends with the village board approving the ordinance and/or annexation.
Yep.
Was that Timber Trails?
Yeah.
And look at the very top bullet point, flexibility. That's what a PUD offers. The zoning code can only get so far. It's meant to cover the whole city. And there are different scenarios, different development scenarios, different building styles. The PUDs offer flexibility. Go ahead and circle that word. That's why they're a wonderful, wonderful tool. So this slide, look over it later. This walks you through a process for a PUD. We needn't go through them now. But they're often two phases in the process for a plan development. They are complex, but they're wonderfully powerful. So they're nothing to shy away from, no chicanery. They're good stuff. Subdivisions. Who here knows the legal description for your property? No? All right. So if you get a chance, check it out. It's probably on your tax bill. Look it out. Check it out. But it's in all likeliness something like Lot 4, Block 2, Heinemann Subdivision. And so that tells you really at the root what a subdivision does. They are they're not really a planning tool, but it's a land organization tool, of course, going back to the founding of America, when they laid out the ranges, back in the early 1800s. All across the country. So subdivision tool, read through these bullet points to help you understand what they are. You'll see them here, and get to know, or at least realize and appreciate that Homer Glen has subdivision code, its own subdivision standards, just so you can see what goes into the review and the evaluation of a subdivision here in Homer Glen. So they're not just something that shows up on your tax bill. They're all around you. So as you drive around and you look at lots, somebody bought that lot, and they bought a specific piece of real estate. They own property line to property line. Well, something created those property lines. It's rarely just happenstance. So just appreciate how they impact the built environment around you. Here's just a note about subdivision regulations, kind of going into more detail about what they establish and what they can accomplish. They can be very powerful in their own right, because again, they create land in a way. They create land in a way that we understand it and appreciate it and experience it on a day-to-day. So just know the subdivisions are real and powerful and impact us every day. Annexation isn't something we need to spend a lot of time on unless it's come up here, but it is a detailed planning process about how cities can take on land by them. And there is such thing as a forcible annexation, but there has to be a really high standard for that. So annexation is when a municipality or a government body adds to its geography. And there is still unannexed land out there. It exists. Building codes and sign codes. The building code is often separate from the zoning code. The building code is exactly what you think it is. It's the International Building Code, IBC, and it's often adopted by a municipality. It's probably not something that you guys will experience or work with on a day-to-day, but know that it's independent of zoning, and it is what establishes all the requirements for what makes buildings safe. And of course, it includes fire codes, electrical codes, plumbing codes. The building code is expansive. We have a chapter just about fences and flagpoles, for God's sake. I mean, the building code is expansive, so just know that it's separate. But sign codes are a huge planning item. We won't go too much into it now tonight. It's probably part of the zoning code. That's quite common in most communities. And you may see sign variations come in front of you. Signs are one of the key ways that the built environment, or at least in the commercial context, interact with the public. And they can be a key source of blight, but if well regulated, they can be really powerful and effective. But does anybody here own a small business? Okay, yes, signs are everything. Signs are how you communicate with the public. If they don't know you're there, you're never going to get any custom. So signs are so important for economic development. Flip side, they can destroy the viewshed in a downtown, Or think about pictures you've seen of Rio de Janeiro or Shanghai when the signs are like, oh my God, just unregulated, just, gangbusters. But then you get into a community where all the signs kind of look alike, and you can't tell a Foot Locker from a lawyer's office because all the signs look alike, and then they're not effective anymore. So it's a real give and take. Get to know your sign regulations and just know that they're there. Signs are a huge part of planning. There's more Supreme Court cases about signs than you would believe. Supreme Court, because they impact free speech. And does it say it on there? Yeah, I think it may. I can't quite read those. You can control where signs go. You can control how big they are. But we cannot regulate the content. You can't, in America, I mean, the Second Amendment rights, not Second Amendment for heaven's sake, First Amendment rights, Second Amendment's a different talk for a different night.
So Andy, just so you know, we updated the sign code about a year ago. We took out all the content related signs like political signs, real estate signs, just classified them as whether they're temporary or, temporary signs. So.
And that's quite progressive. There are many communities, perhaps even mine, that still have regulations that can be like, well, isn't that kind of regulating what the sign says?
That we were like that.
So it's real, and to make signs better now, pursuant to fairly recent Supreme Court cases, that requires a massive rewrite and really kind of a different paradigm, a different look at how signs are regulated. So it can get tricky. So fun stuff. So that's I'll kind of wrap up there. Are there any questions right away about kind of the tools of the trade? Okay, and we can always come back to it later.
Okay, I'm going to go through roles in the process. Quite a bit of this I think you probably already know, but in addition to Plan Commission and others, some communities have these other examples, some don't. Economic Development Commission and a lot of communities, they'll be a bit easier job than you have, except for maybe if they're looking at like an incentive request, if somebody was giving a car dealership money back, a sales tax rebate, they may be looking at that. It might be controversial, but typically beyond that, it's kind of softer issues than you'd be looking at. Environmental commissions, it can vary from community to community as well. Historic preservation, I always think of like Charleston, South Carolina, where they're very strict for an important reason because of the tourist trade there. But somewhere in the Midwest, it might be a little different. It might be a little softer approach to it. And Transportation Commission, we have one that focuses on things as exciting as like stop signs when people want to petition to get a stop sign put in. So I'm glad I don't have to work on that one because those are more emotional than you'd think. So just some examples there. Other jurisdictions which you may or may not have run into during your tenure in the Plan Commission, all the ones that we all pay taxes to one way or another, whether on your tax bill or you're paying through income tax. School and library, or school and park, obviously get involved. If a new subdivision's coming in, you know, there's a kind of a check with them in most communities as to, well, do you need property for a new school in relation to this development and others that are happening, or parks? And that's something that when we talked about comprehensive planning, that should really already be in there and guided. Those decisions should be guided by something like a comprehensive plan, but they may be involved with your planning, and that they likely are. The other ones towards the bottom are kind of more regional or statewide. If it's Route 7, 159th, right? That's 159th? Yeah. Yeah, so that's probably state, I'm guessing. And so they may be involved with like curb cuts on different projects, and that's the kind of thing that would be in a staff report from VJ or staff that let you know that they've got some jurisdiction over it, and that may be a reason why there isn't as many curb cuts as the developer wanted, or some other jurisdiction other than your community. Oh, I skipped one. Regional Planning Commission, where your planning is more kind of down on the ground, or even maybe 5,000 or 10,000 feet up. Regional Planning Commissions are at probably 100,000 feet up, looking at multiple communities. There's no real legal authority there, but they're doing high-level planning. They'll make recommendations generally on land use, but we, the municipalities, regulate it, and you're part of that process, of course. They partner with municipalities. We have a really good one here called CMAP. Their website's pretty interesting. It's worth going to. VJ could always get you that. They do interesting things as far as data. They have community snapshots of every town. There's probably about 15 to 25 pages just about your community that drill down a little deeper than the census, and the way they present it is really easy to read. It's kind of a nice economic development kind of data point that I use now and then for my community. And then role of the commissioner, that's why we're here, right? These ones are obviously pretty obvious, but preparing plans for the future of the community, I always talk to my plan commission when we have either a sub area, a small part of our comprehensive plan that we're updating, or one property, which we did the other night. It was an old garage, auto garage that was falling apart and disrepair. Very weird. It was built in the 50s. We don't have any records of anyone approving it. It was built on residential property in a single family neighborhood. And everybody lived with it. I've been there 15 years. Everybody lived with it for years without any complaints somehow. But then when it fell on hard times and started to fall apart, I went to the attorney and said, we've got to get rid of this. And so we did a comprehensive plan amendment. We brought it to the Plan Commission and said, here's our recommendations from the staff level. And the reason I love that the Plan Commission is involved in in most communities, and if it isn't, it should be, is that ultimately you approve that plan, and then down the road, when projects come through, that's where you've got a guide in your hands, and you should remember that, and it should be something you refer back to for making decisions, and then you can kind of educate the public on it. Well, it's not just, you know, that Bob, our Plan Commission member, or Susie is saying, well, that's what I like. There's some basis in that decision, and it's something that holds up in court too. So that's, you know, one of the things I love about Plan Commission volunteers being more vested than most people realize. Focusing on community vision and character, that comes out of the plan and becomes your guide. Outstanding examples in other communities. I probably mentioned it before, but my thing with plan commissions when I do this is to take tours.
It's tough to get out sometimes on a Saturday or Sunday, but if you can get the Plan Commission to like officially hold a meeting somewhere where you might want to go see a development, like if you know some mixed-use development might be coming in your community, or something that's unique as far as a residential development and you want to see it and you've got to drive, 10 miles north, I'd spend the time to do it. It's well worth it to walk through it, kind of kick the tires and see what's there, and get a feel for whether or not it's appropriate for your community. My wife gets mad at me because we go on vacation. I usually wind up taking pictures of things, whether it's small like streetscape things and how they're done, or signs, or development. I get the kids in the picture sometimes too, but I mean, it's something to kind of study, and it's I see it as a planner's assignment and your volunteer assignment. Visiting developments after occupancy, it can be easy, to skip by that subdivision that was annexed in, 2 years ago, unless you know someone that lives in there, but to make sure you drive through it, or even another community. If you see something being built in, Orland or Lamont or somewhere else that you liked, make sure you drive through it and take a look. If there's questions, you can always call VJ. I'm going to keep VJ busy as they're here. You've probably gotten more knowledge, depending on your tenure here, than others. So when there's something you see in the newspaper about development in another community, you can read it, and when they say there was 3 public hearings, go, oh, thank God I wasn't involved with that. But you've got a better sense for that. Keeping up on that is important, just to know what's going on, and what trends are coming in planning, and then what's happening in other communities nearby. APA publications and podcasts have gone through the roof in my mind as far as quality. Years ago, it was all just paper that we would get. We would get these PAS studies, planning advisory service studies that are still out there, but now there's podcasts from consultants, planners like us, that are pretty interesting. I haven't checked to see if there's any on plan commissioners, but it'd probably be pretty interesting, and probably some good anecdotes and stories from them as well. The APA, the Illinois APA, which we all belong to, is a great organization that is worth joining. You get a variety of topics in planning in newsletters, and the National APA magazine is truly that. It's national. It's got everything from water rights on the West Coast to urban areas on the East Coast and in Chicago, and it's full of information. It comes out monthly, and you get that as part of your membership. And there's also conferences that focus on, or not focus, but have sessions just for Plan Commission members, and those are really interesting. I've sat in some of those and ran one of those one time. They're really interesting. Role of elected officials. Oh wait, did I skip one? Sorry. No. Oh, here we go. So elected officials, obviously they're focused a lot on non-land use responsibilities, budget and infrastructure, and that's where it goes back to my earlier statement about plan commissions. I've always had special respect for, because you're working out the nuts and bolts of things, and hopefully a lot of things have gotten smoothed out before they come to the village board, and they've got to make a decision on it. But the village board, the final decision on a lot of issues, give the policy direction to the commission. So that policy, again, when it comes to land use, should really be directed from the comprehensive plan. If it isn't, then that comprehensive plan should really be revisited. Now that can take time, but because obviously elections happen and views change, but that policy direction to the commission could be something as simple as, hey, could you guys take a look at this issue with VJ? Something as simple as a few years ago, we had the issue that Andy brought up with first floor retail. We had the same thing where our board was saying no more banks or service or office uses on the first floor. And when you think about it, whether it's a strip mall or a downtown building that's got multiple tenants, they really can't function without a mix of uses in there, and it's not fair to the property owner and to the community if you don't have a mix so they can survive and you don't have paper on the windows. In our case, our board assigned it to the Plan Commission and the Economic Development Commission to take a look at that issue. I gave them some background. They did their own research. We came back and made a recommendation. So
And then the board also obviously appoints commission members from that various list of commissions and boards on the first slide. Working with elected officials. So this is pretty self-explanatory. The second bullet down, though, on dialogue for a common vision for the community, again, back to the comprehensive plan. If that kind of thing isn't happening, that might be a good time for a village manager or community development director to say, you know, it's not a bad idea to bring the village board and plan commission and maybe some others together to have a joint meeting. I'm kind of skipping down the bullet points because this is one of the things I've seen work really well, because one, it's nice to see when you guys came in, there was some chat, some informal chatting, and you know each other, but that doesn't always happen, and somebody who's new might not meet someone else who's got a different view. It really does help to get people together, because sometimes in some communities there's this kind of mystique about the, you know, trustee and versus commission member. The trustee has spent the time to get elected. The commission member has spent, you know, quite a deal of their own personal time volunteering for the community. But when you get in the same room, you might find out you have similar views, and for sure the board is going to learn from you because you've been there and you've heard what the residents are saying about development, whether it's a smaller, you know, veterinary clinic going in that requires a special use, or it's an annexation in a subdivision. So it breaks down those barriers, you share some ideas, everybody learns from each other, there's some trust that's formed, and if there's relationships built, and if there's some things to be addressed, you know, that need to be long-term issues to look at, you can, you know, list those and get to work on those over the next, you know, 6-8 months or a year. Role of the planner, or planners, which is nice to see that you have that here, multiple folks helping you out. Obviously, you've got a professional staff. Some communities don't have that, but we are, you know, managing the entitlement process, which is really a fancy word for saying getting approved, whether it's a conditional use or special use or variation or annexation, collecting all that information, getting it ready for you and bringing it forward. The word applicant is on here over and over again. That's one of the things that we have to do is kind of babysit them. Sometimes they're professional development folks with a solid team behind them of an architect, an engineer, an attorney, and sometimes they're not. And so we have to make sure that they understand what your standards are as far as what you'd want to see, you know, because you're going to tell VJ, hey, last time I really would have liked to have seen this from that developer. A few years ago, I had to educate a developer on a project who, in the past, he had just rescued buildings out of foreclosure. He'd never built anything. Well, he was building something, and I said, this building is going to be controversial enough that you've got to do some photo simulation. So I babysat him by taking him out and saying, okay, this view right here is something that you need to, it's amazing what you can do now, as Andy was saying, you know, take a photo and the right architect can simulate what that building is going to look like. And this really worked from about 4 different angles. People were able to say, wow, it's not as high as I thought, and other people didn't like it. But that's the kind of thing that we have to do at the planning level, and you can assist us by telling us, you know, what you want to see from time to time. When we educate, that's a big thing that I talk about with my staff. We educate citizens, so that includes you, but then also the people that come to the counter that may ask questions about projects, whether it's at the counter or in a boardroom, explaining the process, explaining the requirements that the developer has to put forward, the public hearing, notice requirements. There's often questions about that. And then, yeah, the rest of it is pretty self-explanatory. We're obviously explaining the request to people quite a bit, and probably talking to trustees, giving them a heads up of what's coming down the pipe. So working with the planner, Vijay mentioned earlier, sometimes you know, you have plan commission members or others call before the meeting with questions. That's phenomenal. I salute you for doing that. That's great, because then he gets a heads up of what might be coming, and then you're more informed as you come to the meeting. Reviewing past cases to remain consistent. This is a good suggestion. I think when someone's new coming onto the commission, I honestly haven't done this with my planning commission, but I've done it with my zoning board of appeals members. When they're new, I'll sit down with them with our attorney and pull out old cases and show them and say, okay, this is an example of what you might see coming forward. Seems very simple that this garage needs to go here and they can't meet the 5-foot setback, so they want to make it 3 foot, but there's more emotion in it and then you'd think at a public hearing and explain that through. The same thing is good here for new plan commission members that could come along, or maybe even you revisiting something. I mean, that'd be something for a workshop maybe to talk with VJ about, like, you know, that was approved 5 years ago and I don't remember the details. Could we relook at that and what could we do better next time? Yeah, changes to the hearing procedure when needed is interesting. That's the first time I've ever seen a public hearing closed sign. That's not a bad idea because you can let people know how a meeting is run and that there's a certain amount of time to provide public comment. And of course, you know, with free speech and with technology nowadays, if residents do have comments beyond the public hearing, there's always still written comments on hard copy, there's always email, there's voicemail, all of those different things can be used to continue that. So I think it's constant improvement from, you know, hearings of, you know, yesteryear where it was just one and done and that was your chance to speak.
So Marty, that's a little cue we kind of figured out. There were situations where Plan Commission forgot to close the public hearing, so we don't want to get into a legal battle, so we kind of going with that visual.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
So I have a really quick story. I won't go into details, but Tilly Park had a pretty big lawsuit there recently, in the last 10 years. And at the core of that was that they never opened. And so the whole thing was thrown out as part of the lawsuit, and it became a big part of that. But a senior planner there that worked for with me was there at the time when that happened. So she was like terrified of that happening for process purposes.
Yeah.
It's really important, I think, for us to always remember all the little details. We think it's nothing.
Yep.
But that one time, it takes one time for it to be a problem.
Yep.
So that's like, we love our sign.
That's our motto, it just takes that one thing.
Yep, great point. And the last one suggested informal meeting with related municipal committees. That can be a good thing. You know, one of the things we do informally is every like 3 or 4 years, we have a reception for our village board and then all our commissions and bring them out and have like, you know, appetizers and drinks at a local restaurant. One, I like it because we're supporting a local restaurant. And two, it breaks down those barriers, again, like I said, of like the mystique of the trustees, because I mean, we kind of see them, and if you're in the blessed like us, hopefully, right community as normal people. I mean, we're all normal folks. You guys have normal day jobs, but some people think like, oh, he's the mayor. The man. Well, I mean, I had a mayor not too long ago who would have us over for beers after meetings, and he had his own kegerator and in the house, and nobody really kind of knew that outside of there, but he was as normal as can be, and we didn't talk business. We wound up talking about sports and kids and whatever else, but the formal version, and actually it was funny, we put it out as a meeting, so like the public could come if they wanted to. Nobody would show up because it was a gathering of, you know, more than 2 of each commission, and that really did pay dividends. It's a small way to say thank you to folks like you. But the formal setting in here, like I was saying earlier, that's really a good thing when you get committees and commissions together to say, hey, here's an update of what's going on, because I like it for the planning purposes of it, but then just informational. So, because I'm sure some of you have gotten stopped at, you know, Home Depot or, you know, at Meijer or Target or something, because I know the elected folks have for sure, but even the volunteers are like, well, wait a minute, aren't you on the plan commission?
Go to Myers anymore.
Right, right. Or you're cutting your grass with like a, you know, with camouflage on, trying to hide or something. Yeah, so it's, I mean, it's one of those things where you can get informed at that too, that like, okay, here's what Public Works is going to be doing this year as far as infrastructure. So Yeah, sorry, it's going on and on there. Staff report, I'm confident VJ does a great job with this. These can change over time, but getting the who, what, where, and when out there, covering the findings of facts so that legally you're in good shape when you make a decision, and God forbid it goes to court. That's one of the first things that a judge is going to ask about is where are the findings of fact and how did that plan commission make their decision. Comments from other departments? Go ahead, Andy.
Let's ask you gentlemen a second from the last.
Yeah, of course.
So the second from the last bullet point there says something about a staff recommendation. So your staff report typically includes a recommendation?
No, we leave it to the plan commission. We kind of put / recommend, deny, or approve with conditions.
Okay. So it can be easy for citizen planners to look at planning staff and say, you're professionals. Give us a recommendation.
Agree.
What should we do? And I get it. I completely understand that viewpoint. But allow me to just share a quick note about why it's just not that easy. Because if a staff report says staff recommends approval of this, and the planning commission does not, and sends a negative recommendation to the city council, that can, in some senses and in some cases, set up grounds for appeal or lawsuit. A professional planner told you, you realtor, you store owner, you doctor, you physician, you dentist, a professional planner recommended approval for this, and you didn't. And so I'm going to take this to court because I didn't receive due process. So understand that can potentially set up that stage. And that's why many communities, including mine, do not provide a recommendation. We can recommend that how this standard may be satisfied by this and this and this, but that's different. That's a more technical analysis. But it can be very problematic for professional planners to put in a recommendation for approval or something along those lines.
Right, there have been a few instances even since I've been here recommended denial. And I think that's not common, but I think when there's a situation where staff definitely does not support that, and does recommend that, we have said that,
Sure.
stated that before.
When we clearly see the negative impact, we know. We do that once in a while. Yeah, sure.
Oh, I would agree completely, because I would say that if the finding of facts, don't support it, and if it's a directly opposite of what our zoning code shows, you all are very good at making sure that we understand that.
Yes, I agree with that. I never thought about the fact that you aren't recommending approval, though. Isn't that funny? But I do remember recommending denial.
Yeah, and I would say that it makes a big difference for us, especially when we're in situations where it may not be something that personally we all like or don't like, whatever our side we tend to go on. And it makes it clear to us that we have to put that aside, and that we have to go with the findings of facts. We have to go based on the zoning requirements, based on the land use plan, and that we have to make a decision that's based on all those things and that will hold up in a court of law going forward. And that means that we may have to vote for something that we don't agree with because it meets all those criteria, or we may have to vote against something that we don't agree with because it doesn't meet the criteria. So all those things come into play, but our staff does a great job on that.
Good. And for communities like ours that don't make recommendations, and like this is one reason I'll touch on this a bit in my coming comments, is read staff report. Because we're able to say something like, the applicant has not indicated hours of operation. The commission may wish to inquire on this.
Sure.
So, and it's may wish to is something that I'll put in there. If there's a really big hole in an application, and it's not our position to just, call them out. It's like the commission, this is not clear in the application materials, the commission may wish to, and that's not something we can put in that meeting, That's not cool, but it can absolutely be in the staff report.
Yep.
And also, Marty, regarding the communications from the public, we do summarize public comments in the staff report. Sometimes they send us emails like pages and pages, and I know GR reads them. Is it really necessary to read the entire emails into the record?
Our village attorney's not here, so I would say no, but he sometimes says yes, and it is brutal. I mean, I have started playing Words with Friends or something, and I normally don't drift off in a meeting. And one time he read, and I timed it actually, and it was an hour and 15 minutes of reading comments. Thankfully, that hasn't happened very often. But it's not fair to anyone, really, and on bigger cases, what we've done, and actually with Zoom recently, up until we started meeting again in person, we said public comments can be accepted up until this deadline at 3 o'clock. And then if you submit them afterwards and you bring them to Village Hall, sure, we'll email them and send them around, but beyond that, it's 3 o'clock and they haven't been read in. So I think somebody got to our attorney. He's fabulous, but there have been a few times where I think he's been a little too nervous and said, no, we should read these into the record. And it's like, okay, that's what a public hearing is for in my mind, to come. But on the flip side, I understand people can't always get there, but it's a little, insane to read them into the record.
Allow me to share how we approach that. We do have a fairly strong mayor and council supported rule that public testimony is limited to 3 minutes. That's the legally defensible. You can.
Right, you do,
all right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing with emails. All right, we'll read up to 200 words, or if we will read an email that is 200 words or less, because that takes 3 minutes.
Sure, yeah.
And so it's consistent, and that is a glory almighty word.
Yeah.
Consistency.
Yeah.
And so if, Joe Cusack can come up here and talk for 3 minutes, then I will read it, and we let residents know this. An email is 200 words or less. We'll read it aloud. Otherwise, it will be in the meeting packet.
Good idea.
And be part of that. So that's how we address that issue, because that is
Thank you.
painful.
Yeah, I know.
No, it's city policy. Yeah, it's city policy. Yeah, it's
Now,
not.
do you guys, I have a separate question. Do you read findings into the record?
No.
Do you?
Yeah, when it's controversial, our attorney has done that, and even our zoning board chairman is like, do we have, when they're going to approve something, there's a straw poll, and he'll say, and he's an attorney too, and he'll say, do we have to read this? And the attorney will go, no, that's okay. Legally you don't have to, but when it's been something somewhat controversial, he'll have you read through them, and
If they're in a staff report, they're gonna go into the ordinance anyway.
yeah.
In Orland, when I was there, the attorneys were Kleinberg and Jacobs, they're very conservative as well, same thing.
Yep.
And they would make us read the findings
Yep.
into the record.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we didn't always do that, but they've done it a few times, and and then they've had them vote on each finding sometimes.
Oh.
So, which isn't too long, but I mean, it's like 20 minutes of time that you're never going to get back, and they're never going to get back, so, yeah. So, I mean, if you're on the side of caution, they mean well, but it's like, hopefully nobody's an attorney here. I'm sure somebody is.
I have a question. When someone does come up and make a comment, do you put it verbatim in the minutes, or does your staff summarize it?
Well, if it's in a regular meeting portion, just summarizing it, like a sense of what they said. If it's, we have court reporters for everything else. We have court reporters for Board of Zoning Appeals for like your meeting, if there's the public hearing portion, and I just have them do the whole meeting, so then I don't have to have anyone there taking minutes. It's more expensive, but it covers the whole thing. So then we have a verbatim record from beginning to end. So I always tell the Plan Commission at the end, be careful what you're talking about if it's casual talk and it's part of the meeting, because there's someone there typing it. I'll actually say like, well, wait till afterwards and make sure it's not too business related. So, good.
As part of the Open Meetings Act, the requirements for what's in minutes are very specific.
Yeah.
And the minutes do not need to be a transcript. They're different. And so minutes can be a summary.
Okay.
And they need to have starting time and ending time, votes, and nature of discussion. That's it. And I'm paraphrasing. Please look up the one they law. But I'm paraphrasing. Minutes themselves have pretty bare bone requirements. Many communities, like our minute taker, just does what she can during the meeting and then just watches the recording. So they're pretty much verbatim. But they don't need to be. And that's different than a transcript. Court order, she stamps that as this is the verbatim transcript. And that's, like a surveyor stamps a survey. Sorry, a court reporter stamps this transcript as being as accurate as she is legally responsible. Thank you. So and that's a transcript, minutes, two different things.
Two different things.
Yep. Great discussion. Municipal attorneys. So might or might not attend the hearing. I mean, this does vary from community to community. Ours, nearly always do unless it's a workshop, like, something tonight, or if I'm just introducing a project to them informally, or maybe introducing some code amendments, I wouldn't have the attorney there, but then during a hearing, we would. I've seen that vary from community to community based on the comfort level of the decision-making process and the policy. Other key actors, public obviously is a big one. I mean, that's why we're all here, and it's democracy, to listen, ask questions, provide testimony, and being courteous to all, but as Andy was saying, kind of be stern when you need to, because everyone wants to speak and everyone wants to hear what's going on. And I think the one important thing there that kind of travels from the department counter to a public meeting, I always stress with my staff, like I said earlier, it might be someone's first time to come into Village Hall, and so many people have what I kind of call the Nixon effect. I mean, it's from a long time ago, but they don't trust government, they haven't, their parents didn't, and they come in, it's their first encounter, and you want it to be positive. So whether it's someone coming in asking for like a fence permit and what they need, the focus is on education and being polite. I mean, there's no reason not to be. Same thing at a public hearing, to kind of break down those barriers. And Andy was saying earlier, when there's a bigger project, because you can't make 50 copies because you got 50 people in the crowd, but to maybe have a binder available from, if the case is warranted, to be able to pass around to the audience in addition to what they can see on the screen, so they can get educated on a project. Those are the kind of things that are more welcoming, saying hello and obviously being polite, having nice room temperature, that kind of thing, comfortable chairs to sit on. That's just important. Developers' role, they obviously help implement the community's plan. They're focused on different types of development. There's not many that do everything. Some specialize in single family, as you've experienced here, I'm sure, in townhomes. Others focus on commercial and industrial. Andy again said the word consistency. That's what I always think of what they want. They want consistency with what they're going to be required to submit, consistency with what we as planners tell them, what the process is going to be like, and what the time frame hopefully will be like. They've got to answer questions, obviously, and be educated here, educated on the the rules and the process. And they've got to conform to the requirements so that they get through your process. In here, developers, really, it's kind of a misnomer, because you could have, again, that veterinary animal hospital case, as opposed to, years ago it was Gallagher and Henry around here, who probably had that design team behind them. But your veterinary clinic, in my experience, might be Dr. Smith, who's never done it before, and says, you know what, I can do it. And you're like, okay, do you know how to do public hearing mailings properly? Do you know how to, yeah, I got an attorney. He doesn't do real estate law or zoning, but he can do it. And then they're putting together a packet, and that's what we struggle with. And that's where, you have to keep in mind who that applicant is and maybe guide them and say, okay, well, you don't have everything together tonight, Dr. Smith, so we're going to continue the public hearing another week and 2 weeks until you can get your act together. So a little mercy there is sometimes needed.
Then follow up on just one thing here. You're already familiar with standards, and the reviews are based on finding the satisfaction of standards in the code. So whose job is it to verify and prove that an application meets the standards? The developer. It's their job. It's incumbent on them to make the case that their project satisfies the standards. And you guys know people who are great at their job, and you know people who are not as great at their job. It's the same with developers. They're not all, at a high level. And so Marty and I spend a lot of our time as professional planners walking developers up different levels of competency, we'll call it, or professionalism, certainly, through this process. They all get the same treatment. They all get treated fair. We bring them here. But some are more responsive than others. Some work harder than others to show that their project meets the set of standards. And that's it, that's their role. And so,
Yeah, and so their perspective, where they're coming from, is they're focused on profit and getting the project done. A lot of them, take pride in it, of course, too. And that's where that balancing act comes in. Like on that little chart on the side, we're kind of all in this together to make sure the development happens. One of the things that I would just pass along here, maybe we cover it later, but I don't want to forget it. As far as their responsibility to the burden of proof, kind of, is what I was hearing from Andy almost. I think part of what they need to do, and you've probably seen this come out, they need to be smart enough to have an idea of the tenor of the community, or the temperature of the community, I should say, when they come in, whether or not something's going to be acceptable. The staff is going to tell them whether or not they think it has a chance for approval possibly, or, say, well, we're really not sure what they're going to think, but they really should be going out to those people that are on their mailing list that's required for a public hearing, and having their own meeting with those folks ahead of time. I always promote this with people, and sometimes they're like, oh, that would be a colossal pain, but it shouldn't be the first time that they meet the residents or our property owners that come out for a public hearing here. They should meet them beforehand to be able to explain who they are, what they want to do, and they get an idea of whether or not their project is going to go forward. I've had developers do that and then not come forward. Well, that's a good thing in some cases, because it would have been something that would have been a mess for you to deal with, and maybe a difficult decision that could have gone south, whether it's the press or something where you get a bad name in it. They let the developer walk away. So just my 2 cents.
Yeah. So Marty, from time to time, we get developers bringing proposals totally different from the comp plan recommendation. So we had one recently, that's a commercial zone parcel. They wanted to do 100% residential, and the reasoning is the market doesn't support commercial. If you want commercial, it's going to sit vacant for like 10 years. So is that a valid reason to ask the Plan Commission to rezone the property? Just that one reason, the market doesn't support commercial today.
I mean, I would say in a perfect world, if the developer had an inkling of what it's like to be a Plan Commission member, elected official, or staff, to say, why don't you change the comprehensive plan? And here's my reasons why I think you should consider that, not specifically to rezone it. They may be right. I mean, there may be a trend shifting towards, like there was in the 90s, where all of a sudden you saw these warehouses going up that were kind of flex space, like a little bit of office in the front and then storage in the back. And now all of a sudden there's like, gymnastic studios in there. And a lot of times that works out well, from what I've seen. But I think that developer should have to prove up that case, and starting with the staff and then bringing it forward. It's funny that you say that. I go back to like my mantra with the developer, and I say developers, but again, it could be an applicant. I've got some townhouse guys that want to build a small townhouse building, and on that garage site that I was telling you about, it's a minor project, but I told them, here's the list of people that are within 250 feet. I gave it to them with a disclaimer on the bottom saying, you've got to verify with Cook County, these are the right people, but you should talk to these people ahead of time so that you get a feel for what they think. And they're seasoned developers, so they're going to do it. But in your case, they would have to talk to those people, and somebody in that group would probably be smart enough, those residents, to say, well, tell me a little bit about your proposal. Well, this is what the village wants, but I don't want that, I want this. Well, why do you think it's better? I mean, they would probably put them on the spot, so I don't know. Andy, what do you think of that? Is it?
Yeah, what I can say is we hear that all the time. True. If not, certainly monthly or weekly, is that there's no market for this, I'd like to rezone it. And so, so one answer is you can ask. You can put the question and you can ask. So the things to think about are, one, the context of the property. Here's a great example. Fairly recently, Michael Jordan used to live in Highland Park, back in the Michael Jordan days. And his estate is, of course, exactly what you think it is. 7 acres, multi-million-dollar structure, and it sat vacant and been for sale for 9 years. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, who can do this now? Indeed, and so we've had companies wanting to run it as an Airbnb. Oh, could you imagine that? But also a recovery home for chemical issues, people with chemical dependency issues, but also a private club. And of course, you can't do that in a single-family zoning district. So could we rezone this to a commercial district? It is in a single-family residential zoning district. You want an airdrop. boom. And of course they say, this will never sell, guys. You want to sit vacant forever? Your property taxes are low, the city will make more money. That's not how you make good zoning decisions. It's not based on property tax increase, you know. It's based on a comprehensive plan, and this area is single-family zoning on 1 acre lots. And he bought a bunch of them in a much bigger lot, but it's single-family zoning, 1 acre lots. We can't just airdrop it in. Yeah, I get your argument that it's considered, you know, but that's not a reason to rezone, not in and of itself. So the context is very important. So if this developer wants to rezone a single property in a commercial area to multifamily residential, or to multifamily residential, that's just one property. It's called a zoning district because it's meant to establish a context all around it. And then also one of the standards in your code for rezoning may well be, it is not, something like it's not intended to benefit a single person, but to be consistent with the plan for the whole city.
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
They'd be hard pressed to verify that standard is satisfied by rezoning their single property so that they can develop what they want to do.
Okay, thank you.
I also think it's very important to think about what could happen in the future. Once you change that one parcel to residential, then what happens to the parcel that's next to it that was going to be commercial that may someday have a market, right? You've just stolen that from them or created a nuisance. Now you've got residents that are going to come out and complain in a public hearing for that next property. You've just eroded your district.
Absolutely. And it's property by property. And what developers can lose perspective of is that, that rezoning is forever. Your property may be awesome, but it's going to have a life cycle. And you may ask for, multifamily 4, district level 4, where you can get this many units. But I'm only building this many, so I'm not even using it. Once it's rezoned, it's that way forever. And so once your building goes through its life cycle, 50, 80 years, and is demolished, somebody can build that property to the max. And that's still a part of the city. And is not consistent with the city. So it's our job to think a lot past their return on investment. They're not, and God bless them. I'm not disparaging the profession at all. But their job is to think about return on investment, ROI. And then once this project is completed, in Homer Glen, they're coming to Orland Park, or they're coming to Highland Park, and they're going to build there. And they got built, the rezoning got through, they're done. But we live with that stuff forever. Okay, so, and I think we're doing okay on time. Vijay, are you okay to keep going? Would you like to take a break? What do you?
No, we're
okay.
8:20, yeah.
So I'm going to spend a couple of slides talking about you guys, the responsibility of the Plan Commission members. And one of the key things that I'll hit on in these next few slides is how important it is to appreciate your role. You're volunteering your time here, you're serving the community, public service, that is absolutely wonderful. But to echo some of Marty's comments, when applicants come in here, they don't know if you just started on the commission. They don't know that, they don't know. You represent the city. When they come to appear before the city, you guys are it. And so everything that you do in your meeting, how you conduct yourselves, how you interact with each other and how you interact with the public, how you interact with the developer, reflects on the village. So it's just so important to keep that in the back of your mind. That first, the first bullet point there, understanding the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. So I'll just ask, how many of you have opened up the zoning ordinance on the village's website? And okay, rock on. So, okay, wonderful. I'm pleased to hear that. How many of you know what zoning code your house is in? Okay, so rock on. So. It was zoning district. I say zoning code. What's the district? So, to the extent you can, try and find out what zoning district you live in. Just poke around and find that out, and figure out exactly what your setbacks are. That's a way to dig into the zoning code just a little. It won't take but 10 minutes, and you can even cheat and email VJ and say, "How do I find this out?" Because Andy said I had to.
Sure.
We have a new ArcGIS online land use viewer you can use.
Right on.
Right.
So. So the goal is to break down any unfamiliarity with the zoning code, any hesitancy to look at it. Just get a familiarity with the city's zoning code. It's essential. You don't have to have sections memorized. That's not your role. That's our job. We get paid to do that. But one thing I've begun doing since we really moved to digital packets over the last 1.5 to 2 years is in my staff reports, I'll hyperlink a section of the code. So my commissioners can click on it as they're reading their PDF on their iPad or on their computer. They hyperlink it and they can click on it. And so I can say, this property has a 35-foot setback. Okay. But when they can click on it and actually see it in the code, oh, okay, got it, and then keep going. Or the height of a building in the downtown is limited to 40 feet. Okay, Andy says so. Oh, I see, in the I zoning district, it's 40 feet. So that's an easy way to just get more familiar. The more times you look at it, and the more times it helps. It just breaks down the barrier of what this nebulous document is, and it can make it a little bit more tangible. And look at the second bullet point there. Read the packet to be informed at the hearing. If you guys want to hear a heart break right over here, come to the meeting and just say, I didn't have a chance to read the packet. You'll hear it. You can hear it. It's shattering. It sounds like linoleum ripping. It's staff, you know, we love our jobs and we take it very seriously. That's why we do what we do. And so we're able to execute our job and do our jobs and share our passion with you through these staff reports. We help you do your job better as citizen planners by preparing our staff reports the best we can, and we spend a lot of time on them. And so please do make every effort to read them. And the presentations that staff give at the meeting are largely for the benefit of the public. You know, they're here to kind of help you separate the wheat from the chaff and realize, okay, we're going to talk about this tonight, but they're not intended to be a full summary, nor are they a full detailed summary of the packet and the staff report. So keep that in mind. The presentation you see here is mostly for the benefit of the public, also to let sometimes to let the developer know what we caught in their plans that they hope they might slip by us. So keep that in mind. Do come prepared to the meeting. It is absolutely incumbent on you throughout your term to just make every effort. If you can't, you can't. You know, email staff and just say, I didn't get a chance to, kid went to the dentist, or, you know, kept us up late, couldn't read the packet. Now we know. That's fine. So just keep that in mind. As a new commissioner, it's okay to sit back for the first 3 or 4 meetings. Just take it in, get a feel for the tempo. But once it's important for you to get a feeling of comfort and to participate, to play an active role. Ask questions. That's okay, because if you're wondering it, somebody else is too. So it can be so easy, and I struggle with this with right now one of my new commissioners. I was afraid to ask. I didn't want to sound stupid. I get it. That's human nature. So if you're not comfortable asking at a meeting, then you can email beforehand. But if there's something in the testimony that comes up, just raise your hand and get the chair's attention. That's A-okay. So there's just nothing wrong with that. Please keep that in mind. Commission responsibilities during the meeting. Look at that third bullet point. Looks familiar. Consider conditions that are going to reduce impacts on the public. That's a key part of what you're able to do in your role. You know, residents can come up here and say something, I'm worried about this. Okay, good. You know, happy you thought of that. But that is something that should be going through your mind. As a plan commissioner, that's a big part of your role. You guys know the community as well as anybody in this room, and certainly as well as any developer that comes in here. So or applicant, not just a developer, but an applicant who wants to open up a gas station with a 24-hour car wash. Somebody wants to open up a veterinarian's office. Be thinking about these externalities and the conditions that might ameliorate them or address them. So I think, those are the 2 big things that I wanted to touch on. But look at the second to last bullet point, obtain information. That's also your role. And if you don't feel like you're getting enough information, I'd like to ask a question, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, may I please ask a question? If there's still anything that's kind of hanging out there, don't be shy. I wish I could say you're being paid not to be shy, but you're not. But it's your role not to be shy, not to be a wallflower. It's your role to understand something. And if you feel an applicant is just answering the question that he wanted you to ask instead of the question you actually asked, don't stop asking. That doesn't mean it doesn't mean you're dumb. It doesn't mean you're not getting it. It means they're doing a bad job explaining it. Because you know, your recommendation is going to go to the city council. And if you didn't understand it, you can't just assume, oh, they'll figure it out. No, they won't. They got enough on their place at the council agenda, village board agendas. There's a lot on there. And they pay you guys to do the grunt work, to ask the questions, to formulate the recommendations. And so it's so important to leave here feeling like I got my questions answered. I don't know how I want to decide. That's fine, but I got my questions answered. And then look at that last bullet point. If you feel it's, it's coming on 9:45, it's 10 p.m. Okay, we're all bleary-eyed. I think we're at a good stopping point. I'd like a motion to continue this to the next meeting. Or if you've given the applicant a lot of good counsel and things they need to revise, can you get things fixed in a week, turned around? No, it's gonna take you longer? All right, let's continue this for a month. VJ, what's the next agenda? Boom, continue it for a month. That's okay. And staff advises applicants, don't expect to get out in one meeting. You might not. That's normal. It doesn't mean you have a bad application, sir. It just means the commission has questions that need to be answered. A property owner in Highland Park has a strip center, and they have a sign package, and they wanted to amend it for a new tenant they came in. And so they took their own sign package and basically did the equivalent in Microsoft Word of scratching one part out, writing new stuff in, scratching one part out, and putting in a new photograph. Here's our new amendment. We'd like these new signs. And I was like, oh, this is not going to go well. And I tried to advise the applicant. They weren't hearing it. And so they brought this hot mess to the commission. It went exactly like you think it did. It was a train wreck. And they just chewed on it for a half an hour. It was painful. And they just said that we need a lot more clarity. We can't. I'm going to continue this and give you 3 weeks to work on this and bring it back. And the applicant needed to hear that. And they did. They worked on it, and it came back. It's crisp, it's clean, it reads like it should. There's good high-quality graphics in there. The commission didn't get the information they wanted. This package didn't make any sense. And so they kept asking questions and just said, this is unclear. We need more clarity before we can approve this. And the applicant accepted that because it took a half an hour. So the applicant accepted that, went back and cleaned up. So just a good example of what it means to not stop asking questions. It doesn't mean you don't get it. It means the applicant is not doing a good enough job of saying their thing. So this slide here is one that I'll reiterate to just appreciate the gravitas, to use a $4 word, the gravitas of your role. You've been appointed by the mayor to fill these seats, to ask the questions, and then appreciate that applicants are coming to you, and it's incumbent on them to make the case and to vocalize clearly, to state their cases clearly. And so being patient is important. If somebody isn't getting through, you can communicate that politically, you can communicate that effectively without nipping and rolling your eyes. There are ways to say you don't care for the exterior appearance of a building than saying, oh God. There are ways to say things in a way that are communicative and supportive, that get your point across, rather than like, give me a break. And believe me, there's a lot of give me a break in your job that there's supposed to be. But there's ways to say it that communicate clearly what you're trying to say. So it's remaining calm and relying on good communication and working through the chair. And so this is voting based on standards. And so this gets into, there was too many stories, but it's important to use the standards, to rely on them. We'll touch on those in a second about what these standards are. But a key part of every staff report is the standards. A key part. You'll never read a staff report from a professional planner and your planning staff that doesn't have the standards in it. Here's what you base your decision on. And to the extent possible, Madam Chair, rope the conversation back around, loop it back around to the standards, okay? I think we've had a good discussion. Let's take a look at the standards and let's go down the list. You needn't read every one, it needn't be laborious. But it's a good idea after deliberation to kind of circle back to the standards so that the applicant can feel and know, and the city attorney can breathe deep and know that this discussion was not subjective. They grew up next to me, they never liked me, or they saw my Maserati out there and they judged me. And so if you come back to the standards, it doesn't matter. Anybody, rich or poor, has to follow these set of standards. This is a good slide. There's a lot of stuff on here. Go ahead and read through it. But there are a lot of things that just don't fall in the purview of the Plan Commission. So you look at those things, private security, gosh. One great example that I continue to run into through my career is we'll see a multifamily building come in, and a new commissioner will say, is it owner or rental? Oh, like that doesn't matter. That's not a zoning decision. This is a land use discussion. And if it's a multifamily building, it's going to have people coming and going. It's going to have garage. It's going to have, 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom units. That's a land use discussion. It's going to have signs, and it's got to have utilities that can serve it with enough sewer and water. That's the discussion that we have here. Whether the business model of the developer and whether it's owner or rental is not a land use discussion. So that's a classic example of what doesn't fall under the commission's purview. Boy, people have asked, what are your selling points? Or, excuse, like, what are your price points for rental? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. And so staff will jump in, and say, Madam Chair, if the conversation goes on, and if the question slips out, okay, it doesn't make the meeting infirm, but move it along. Like, okay, somebody's bound to ask. It's happened, with every commission I've ever worked on. Like, all right, okay, got it, let's go. So it's there are things that just fall outside of zoning. Look at a few things there. Rents, oh my gosh, there it is right there. Responsibilities of the chair. It's a tough job. And it's important for the commission to recognize the chair and work through the chair. It's important that public testimony questions are directed to the chair, and then the chair writes them down, and then is able to show them later. It can help out the flow if the commission, and this all depends on the context of how the meetings in the village are conducted. Madam Chair, I have a question, and raise your hand, and then you can speak when you're recognized by the chair. And again, I defer to you. You guys have, you spend a lot more time in here than I do, so you can decide if that works. But it can be very helpful to see the chair as the figurehead and go through that. But look at that, the third PowerPoint, third bullet point from the bottom. The chair is the one that can focus the discussion. It's the chair that can let meetings run off the rail. And I say that respectfully, of course, present company accepted, of course. But it's when you get this guy back here, and it's the chair who's like, please, no clapping. Yes, exactly. It's the chair who does that. Nope, none of that. And, or worst case, we've had somebody in a contentious hearing that spoke in favor of the project, and people started booing. And the chair was like, hard no. No, he banged the gavel, and he's professional, and said, this is Highland Park. We do not treat residents like that. And it's the chair who sets the tone for the meeting, because once that clapping starts, man, it doesn't stop. It's terrible. And it's so whose role is to stop that? Madam Chair with the gavel, call this meeting to order, and then, worst case with the city attorney's assistance, you can close the hearing to a different date, or the city attorney's guidance. So that's the chair's role. Not an easy one. This is one I'd encourage you to take a look at on your own. I'm certainly not going to read through all these, but this is a typical hearing procedure, and it just kind of walks through the pace of the meeting between staff report and then the opening of the public hearing, the staff report, the applicant gets to come up here and make his case, and then the public gets to ask questions, and then there's time for the commission to give those questions, have those questions answered by the applicant, and then sometimes once the public hears what how the questions are answered, well, they just want to come up here again, and so it's a matter for the chair and and the village itself about how much more public comment you want to have. We have found that we've had to sort of close the public comment portion. The public hearing we keep open until in fact, it's not too often we'll close a public hearing. It just closes itself when our city council makes their final decision. Because once a public hearing is closed, then it has to be reopened. And if somebody has another comment, when the public hearing is closed, then the chair has to agree to reopen it, and that's its own can of worms. So the public hearing is closed, same thing as what we've done. Public comment is closed, we're moving on because the public, if they're angry, they'll just find the next thing the applicant says, no, that's not true, and it'll just keep going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And ultimately, we've had residents get mad. You let the applicant come up here and keep talking, it's because they're the applicant. They're paying for this. It's their application. They can get up here and address every comment that they want, that they want to at the chair's discretion. But they're not the public. The public doesn't have the same right to keep coming up as the applicant does. It's their floor. It's their meeting. So take a look over that and just kind of get a feel for the flow of the meeting. Testimony, I think we've kind of touched on this already. In the community that I work, we do time, even the mayor will time comments at the city council meeting to 3 minutes. She'll hold her iPhone up to the microphone. We all work on the computer, have screens like this. So as a staff member, I run the Plan and Design Commission in Highland Park. There's a free timer online. It's like onlinetimer.com, and you can set it to 3 minutes. And I put it up on the screen so that people are up there And it's for fairness, so that nobody thinks they got 3.5 minutes, you know? No, it's right up there. And the chair will often let people go a little bit further, you know, because that's just good customer service. But this thing's loud when I turn the speakers on. I mean, it's piercing. And it's right up there for the whole public to see, 3 minutes counting down. You know, oh my God, one time I was busy taking notes and I forgot to turn it on for somebody. And boy, these crowd, turn the timer on! So, because he was gonna get more time than other people. So like, oh, sorry. So it's a good visual tool to put the timer up on the screen, because then everybody can see it. Again, transparency and consistency. Nobody's getting special treatment. So that can be helpful. Yes, please.
Quick question on the timer. Does that time have to be set by ordinance or just policy?
Policy, city policy. Yep. And our city attorneys have advised us, as long as you're treating everybody the same, it's fine. In some communities, 3 minutes is too short. No, we do 5. We do 5. But it's timed in many communities, and that's fine. And so no, it's not codified. It's not in the code. It's policy.
Thank you.
God, I don't know. I don't think so. So findings of fact, pretty straightforward here. You guys are familiar. They're clearly very familiar with them by this point, so I don't need to go into this.
Quick question, I'm sorry.
Yes, of course.
Do you ever let someone come back up and speak a second time?
Yes. Yep. But.
3 minutes?
Yep, they get another 3 minutes. Yeah, good question. So first, everybody gets a chance to speak first before anybody can be heard twice. So we're very clear on that. And yes, people can certainly come up for an additional 3 minutes. But again, that's all they get. And
If they have something new to add.
precisely. Yes. Thank you, Marty.
I think she was up there 3 times.
And you know, at that 10:30 mark, the chairman has said, "We've already heard that several times. Thank you." Nope. Yes, we've already heard that from several residents. Thank you. Thank you. And he'll just zip it, because no, we're not here to humor you. You know, like, no, we've already heard this. We've also had residents come up and say, thank you, my name is Elizabeth Shue, I live at 2222 Maple, and I'd like to echo the comments from the previous 4 people. Thank you. Fine, great. You know, it's just sort of that re-amp, and it's when somebody speaks that fast, that's fine. You know, we don't care that you came up and said you agree. That's fine if you're out of there in 10 seconds. So that's, so we've had people do that, that's fine. But here is what we get. My husband is here and I'd like to cede my 3 minutes to him. My dad's here, I'd like to cede my 3 minutes to him. So I got 9 minutes now, right? No. No, you do not. No. So there's no ceding of time. And we have really, we've had, so we've had one dude who's like, you know, I have 20 minutes because these 4 residents have all said they cede me their time. Brings up a board and it's like, no, you don't. So just some more comments on the findings of fact. This is some cool planning theory that I would encourage you to check out. I certainly read through these read through these individually. But zoning does have, planning and zoning in particular, has a wonderful history in America. And it's kind of a new field, which is one reason, fairly new, the one reason it's so cool to study and practice. And I'm excited for you guys to be exposed to it. I hope you feel excited and eager to be exposed to it as well. So give this a read, circle it on your pages, and do come back to it later because it's pretty cool. We've talked about special uses already, so I won't spend a great deal of time on these. But special uses are, they're land uses that are allowed. And that's, so here's one thing that's important to note, is that just because something's conditional doesn't mean you can necessarily deny it. You know, the idea is to put conditions on the use that will make sure it doesn't negatively impact neighbors. But since the tool for conditions are there, it can be tough in some legal circumstances to just out and out deny a special use. It happens and there are grounds for it, but the idea is that a conditional or special use, they're interchangeable. Conditional use, special use, same thing. The idea is that the village allows them, that's fine, open your veterinarian store, but no overnight boarding, no walking animals outside. Where are you storing the drugs? Let's make sure they're locked up, that sort of thing. Oh, believe me, that came up. Terrible memory, sorry, PTSD. So the special use standards, those are in your code, and those are something that staff will put in every staff report for a for a special use request. And, and so there's some neat italicized terms there that kind of walk you through really the really salient points of what special use, of what the standards are. And so the idea is to put on conditions that have a nexus with the land use. Don't run the lawnmowers before 8 a.m. Or the car wash at the soup and clean has to turn off at 10 p.m. The blowers do. Those are very, very good standards, very appropriate standards, but they're strictly related to the land use. And that will help you, with the appropriate conditions, find that these standards are satisfied. Variations. So, VGA, does Homer Glen have a separate zoning board of appeals?
No, just the plan commission. They do everything.
Lucky guys. Lucky cats. So you're familiar with variations. What are they? Basically, they are a way to honor the code while still respecting a case-by-case basis or special situations, but respecting the spirit of what the code is. And look at that first bullet point and that word in black, a hardship. So I had a resident who bought a property with a huge wetland on it, and then wanted a variation to move his house way next to the line because of the wetland. We're like, no, it was there when you bought the property. You knew about it. That's not a hardship. You knew it was there when you bought the property. And so, hardships can be difficult to show, but there are a lot of legitimate hardships. So it's just good that you good that you review them. Again, kind of like we talked about with rezoning, it's a lot to do with context. A lot to do with context. Where a height variation in some circumstances may be very appropriate, than others just specious, to use another $4 word. Again, standards. As you're looking at the standards, it's not just about they have a child with special needs, so they need an 8-foot fence. Okay, I get it, but let's look at the standards here and really review it here by the standards. It's not oh God, that must be so hard. Yes, have your fence. That's not how we make a vote. The vote is on finding the satisfaction of the standards. So,
Go back for a second.
Of course.
Because I feel like we have this a lot, and where the top one is not met. So in a single-family home,
Yeah.
variance, it's just like setback. We just had one, the setback for the pool. You certainly cannot answer that question that they're not going to be able to get a return on their house by not having a above-ground pool in the backyard. You know what I mean?
I do.
Answer, if they can answer that question, I can't as staff give findings that answer that question. I answer it honestly, in the findings, I say that they could get a reasonable return on the house. But I don't think that it ever comes up a question. We don't ever say that if they didn't need it.
Well, that is tough. And so it can get, one way is just sort of you do that. Another is to say no evidence was presented, documenting that. That's no evidence was presented at the public hearing documenting that the applicant could not realize a reasonable return on this. I've used that when it's a real head scratcher. Yeah. It's like, well, they didn't make the case, or sometimes no testimony was provided at the hearing suggesting that property values would be negatively impacted.
Melissa, was that brought up not by obviously the owner who wanted moved pool, by a neighbor? Is that
the issue with the reasonable return?
yeah?
So we answer all these questions. So
Right.
like they're in our staff report, and the applicant has to answer the findings, and then staff makes finding recommendations as well in the staff report. So, but we have that top question about whether or not it can yield a reasonable return. It just, I've answered it numerous times on variances just like that, where their house is the value, the fact that you can or can't put a shed up in your backyard isn't really going to impact that too much.
Right.
And we really we didn't address it. We didn't even really talk about it in the meetings.
No, we never have, no.
It's interesting, we don't even have that one, I was just thinking about that.
The top one?
No, we don't have the top, we start with the second one down, and then we have those 6 from there down.
Yeah.
Someone has our attorney.
Why that one's not on there?
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine many cases where that would come into play, I mean, it's just, yeah, it might be something to
That's a
revisit.
weird question, like,
Yeah.
you don't need that one on there?
Yeah.
No, maybe when we have-
These things are based on case
Maybe
law.
when we have one that we
They came
do,
out
it's
of
gonna
case,
stick
you
right
know,
out.
because,
Yeah.
usual things you should follow, so,
Yeah,
yeah, that's interesting.
increase it.
Increase.
It would increase it, yeah.
Decrease.
Yeah, Beth said, Melissa, if you throw that one out, the next case that walks in the door.
Yeah, you know,
No, that's
there
where
may
it
be a
goes.
glaring one.
Get an opinion from the attorney first and
Got it.
Yeah.
go from there. So we're going to finish up here. We're going to both do this one. Andy will pitch in too, but some of this is pretty common sense ex parte. So conversations that you may have with applicants or residents at a off-site, you really have to be cautious about. I always tell my Planning Commission members, I mean, if you have to do a windshield survey of a site while you're there because there's people out there, you know, that's fine. But visiting a site is important, especially with the variations since we're on that. That can be very emotional because it's kind of, you know, hyper-focused on one site and one aspect of a property. Tell them to be careful out there. If you do encounter someone, you've got to disclose that at the meeting. It's the best way to do it. I mean, to you know, shine sunlight on it and say, okay, you know, here's a conversation that I had. Minimal conversation is best, as it says here. It's all kind of common sense. These last slides are all things that are, you know, if it doesn't pass the smell test, then, you know, there's something you should be worried about. And I mean, just being honest and open with the staff and then the public when you're here about any conversations that happen is the key, really. And when in doubt, you can always talk to VJ and the village attorney if needed.
So, can we go back?
Yeah, sure.
So, living in a small town is awesome, but it's also hard when people see you and want to talk to you about a case. So, let me tell you two things to write on this slide. One, say, please come to the meeting. Please come to the meeting. Please come to the meeting. Or please email staff. You know, email city staff your comments. You know, this isn't something I'm able to talk about. Don't walk away. Don't turn up your nose. Just be polite, but be firm and say, given my position, my appointed position on the Village Planning Commission, this is not something that we should be talking about without the other commissioners here. So please come to the meeting or email city staff. Okay? It's because if somebody else sees you doing that, it's nothing good will happen. You know, and you can't come to the meeting and be like, you know what I heard? I heard somebody really doesn't want this next door. You can't say that. It doesn't matter. You know, it just doesn't matter. Or I'm really hearing from people they're upset about this rezoning request. Who cares? You know, that just doesn't carry any weight. So the best thing, so there's really no benefit. That's what by way of saying there's really no benefit having these ex parte communications because you can't use this stuff here. And just the best, most transparent way, please come to the meeting. Please say this to the meeting. Oh, I can't make the meeting. We have soccer camp. Okay, please email city staff. Can I email you? No, please don't. Email city staff.
Right. And we've had people ask for like your plan, you know, your email and everything else, and we would never give that out. And I mean, they may find you on their own, but I always tell people they ask about it because we have it published on the website, but with no contact information or photos. And I know where they're headed, and I'll say, you know what, don't. I strongly recommend against you contacting them. It's really not, you know, kosher. It's not something you should do. And sometimes they still do. Not very often, thank God. But yeah. Ethics, again, another common sense issue. I mean, serving the public without any need for, you know, your own goals to be met or your own personal gain. That does happen sometimes. There's some laws here that obviously regulate how planning commissions are to operate in ethics in the municipal world. I don't think there's very often where people will bring you gifts here or anything, but that's something else to be careful with. Nobody should be buying you, you know, dinner at a local restaurant, of course. Again, common sense. Conflicts of interest are an interesting thing. They can come up from time to time. If you've got you know, business or a financial relationship that connects to a project. Again, to me, it's kind of that smell test. One of the next slides after this talks about if you're a member of an organization, which, you know, you're a member and they're coming before you, say like it's the school district and they're, you know, expanding and buying property and want to rezone it, and you're part of the PTA or you've been a coach there, well, you could still vote on that and feel comfortable. But if it was something where your brother-in-law is coming in to rezone something, you might not have a financial gain in it, but there might be the appearance of impropriety because it's it's not a blood relative, but it's a relative by marriage. I mean, it's really, I've had a lot of times where I have plan commissioners or zoning board members call, and it's kind of gray, and I'll say, you know what, let's have a conversation with the attorney, just kind of to cover my butt too, but to give them some guidance on somebody who's seen more of this than I have, and to get three heads together rather than just two of us. So the rest of this you can kind of read on your own as we wrap up, but
Marty, one note.
go ahead.
Is it conflict of interest? Is nothing to be ashamed of. It doesn't mean anything wrong. And again, in small communities, it just happens. It just happens. So it's nothing to be ashamed or embarrassed about. It's nothing that makes you be in trouble. It's nothing that makes you a bad commissioner. It's not. What makes you a bad commissioner is not saying anything. You know, or even asking a question. Hey, I'm concerned. This guy was a client, and or I sold their house 2 years ago. This happened on my commission. I'm a realtor out there, and she sold us down their house. And said, okay, how long ago was it? 2 years ago. Oh, for heaven's sake. That's fine. And we ran it by an attorney. You know, this isn't something that I don't make this decision. We upchain it to the city attorney, and he makes the call.
Perfect example. And then when you do recuse yourself, this is an important thing that I didn't learn till 5 or 6 years ago. Recusing yourself, if you get out and just kind of sit in the audience and you abstain, well, an abstention for our attorney goes with the majority. So it's almost like you did vote. So the part about leaving the room and getting out of here is important. It's kind of odd when you think about it because you're just sitting back here. You're not putting, like sending signals back up to the front. You get out of the room and you're out of there, then that's the best way. And for transparency, that's best way to handle it. And disclosing things for the record, if it's a case like Andy mentioned with a broker from something that was 2 or 3 years ago, then it's on the record and you're free and clear. When it's not a conflict, I was given that example in bullet number 2 of if you're associated with the school district. I'm sure there's other examples you can think of, but again, pretty simple. Open Meetings Act, why do we have this? Well, because we're Illinois. We've had governors go to jail, and we've had others, not here, but this is really some of the good things that the state has done, and I'm sure you've all had to take Open Meetings Act training. It was actually pretty good last time I did it from the state, and it's a nice thing that as the third or fourth bullet there says holding you accountable and making sure you understand what your job is and how meetings run so you can explain them to people and run a meeting properly. So pretty simple, especially since you've been through it. All commission meetings are open to the public. I don't know that there's that much more. Gathering of majority of the quorum to discuss business is a public meeting. So if there's 2 or more, or there's 2 of you talking about something, that might be fine. If it's 3, that's officially a meeting. You have to be very careful with that.
Emails go out, do you do BCC on emails to the commission?
Yeah.
Because it's one of the biggest, most common Open Meetings Act fails is somebody hitting reply all. And so it's like, because then when that went to more than 2 people, it went to the whole bloody commission. And then somebody's like, I can't make the meeting, but I'm going to vote this way. Or it's like, oh God, no. And so that's why BCC is a godsend. And that's blind copy. So you don't see your name in your email on there when it came.
Yep, always err on the side of caution. So that's just about all we have. There's some other slides with some resources, but you can take a look at that on your own. So,
I have a question.
Sure.
I do have a question on the blind copy, though. God forbid someone requested a FOIA on the topic for anyone in the organization and realized that they were getting an email and they were blind copied. Wouldn't that still kind of be a violation because you're still replying to all?
Walk me through the scenario.
Okay, the blind copy is only if someone is sending it out?
When staff emails the commission, a quorum call. Hey, can you guys make the meeting? Here's what's on the agenda. So it's BJ sends it to himself, or but even BCC's blind copies.
All of you.
All right, I was confused because then on the reply all, just do not hit the reply all. I thought you meant you could blind copy people when you send
Right,
it
you
back.
would be able to
All right.
hit reply all, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just go right back.
I thought when you were replying, you were saying BCC. That was my question, thank you.
Well, good, so yes, as Marty noted, just take a look, once you at the resources page. And there is just a lot of great stuff on there. The American Planning Association has the most wonderful body of resources. So if you want to learn more about field of planning, I encourage you to. Marty, they still do the commission newsletter?
I don't know.
Everybody
Yeah, let's do
do I think it was quarterly, a newsletter called The Commissioner.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful, just some great intros to this or that, and I simply don't know to my cost. As I said, I don't know if they're still doing it.
Yeah.
Those may be archived, but there it is, the fourth bullet point. So do just write on, okay, go to the next page, the very first website, planning.org. There's just so many wonderful tools and that's one neat thing about the planning is that it's all about education and it's such a supportive network as a whole.
Yep.
So planning.org is a national one, and the resources there are just stellar. And there's a lot of onboarding planning commissioner training materials on there that are a little more generic. We're able to really cater the state of Illinois into our communities as we do it. So do check that out. Plan Medicine is often great. Check out the second bullet point under other organizations, strong towns. They're from my home state of Minnesota, and so it's one reason I love them. But a lot of great ideas there that are just worth reading. Some are a little out there, but some of the stuff's really great about just strong downtowns and strong small towns.
Yeah.
So I recognize that. Do you have any favorites?
No, that one, Strong Towns, is really cool. Very interesting one that I just found in the past couple of years. So.
Landmarks.org, third from the bottom. They are a Chicago-based historic preservation advocacy organization that has a nationwide reputation. They're among the best in the country at what they do. So at least know that Landmarks Illinois exists. So when you read about them in the news, and you will and do, you'll know what they are. So I think that just know that there are some really great resources out there. Any on the other page here, Marty?
No.
Quick touch on? I think it's worth looking over.
Yep.
Up there. So we'll close with the very last slide there.
Says thank you.
Scott, thank you. So thank you all for being here.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate what you guys do and admire you for it. And I hope this has been helpful and we touched on some interesting stuff.
Yeah. We'll stick around if there's any questions or anything.
Does the commissioners have any questions for the speakers?
No?
Could we email you if we get any later?
Of course.
Okay.
Thanks again for your time. It's always, you guys always do a great job
Oh, thank you.
with everything.
Thank you very much.
Just a little plug for the organization as a whole, too. I've been a member since 2017. Attended, at that time, I think conference was close by in the area.
Sure.
It's been a great tool for me over the last 4 years, so I would recommend it for you, for the trustees, especially the new trustees, and any of you guys that have any interest in it. There is a lot of things at the conference. I don't know, did they decide if conference is going to be
The state
virtual or in
conference?
person now? I know
Yeah.
it's scheduled
Yeah.
to be in Bloomington normal, but
Yeah. In September, I don't remember the exact
I
date.
think it's
Yeah.
October. I
Is it
read.
October? Okay,
Yeah, so they don't know. I think they might do virtual or on-site. I think they're talking to the hotel facility.
We're trying to figure that out?
Yeah, figure that out,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, last year it was virtual, and it was still very good, so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. So, thanks again.
You're welcome.
No problem. Pleasure to be here.
Sure.
Thank you.
BJ, you
Yeah.
have a survey
Okay.
and the sign-in sheet. You guys get a diploma.
Yeah, there's, signing sheet is on there, yeah.
But you legit get a certification and training.
Yeah.
So it's legit.
Sure. Nice.
Rockport just became one of these strong towns, just a couple months ago, yeah,
Oh, strong town.
yeah.
Do you want the surveys back tonight, or?
Yes, please.
Okay, all right.
Madam Chair, yes, if you could just spend a minute or two, a minute or two going through them, that would be wonderful, and staff will collect them, and just to save them, actually,
Thank you.
you can take them with us, or you can scan the email.
Can I, yeah, I can scan them out.
All right,
Yeah, I don't mind.
we can fill them out now, and then we'll go on to our next item after that. Is that okay, VJ? All right, okay.
Take a few minutes, I guess, yeah.
I'm gonna do a survey.
Okay.
I'm such a dork.
Oh, my God.
We are. That's why we do.